On This Week in Enterprise Tech, Curtis brings more experiences back from RSA and takes us through whether there's a perfect travel program or not out there. The coronavirus is affecting all facets of the market. We'll talk a little bit about how it's affecting businesses and the technology sector. Plus, Curtis, Brian, and I talk with a great guest, Skylar Talley, Associate Director of Product Management and Development at AT&T. Talk about managed threat detection and response. It's Wyatt on the set. This Week in Enterprise Tech is brought to you from LastPass Studios. Stay in control when it comes to your company's access points and authentication. LastPass makes enterprise-level security simple. Check out lastpass.com/twit to learn more.
Podcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
This is Wyatt. This Week in Enterprise Tech. Episode 383, recorded March 6th, 2020. SecOps and AT&T's management and detection response. This episode of This Week in Enterprise Tech is brought to you by Thinks Canary. Detect attackers on your network while avoiding irritating false alarms. Get the alerts that matter. For 10% off and a 60-day money-back guarantee, go to canary.tools/twit and enter the code TWIT in the How Do You Hear About Us box. And by IT Pro TV. Get the most up-to-date IT training with IT Pro TV. Their video courses, virtual labs, and practice tests will give you everything you need to become a successful IT professional. Visit itpro.tv/enterprise for an additional 30% off for the lifetime of your active subscription. Use code ENTERPRISE30 at checkout. And by Worldwide Technology. Their advanced technology center is like no other testing and research lab with over 150 different security services and applications from partners like F5, Red Hat, and NVIDIA. And it's virtual, so you can access it 24/7. Become a member at www.com/twit to join the growing community and gain access to their on-demand labs. Welcome to Wyatt, This Week in Enterprise Tech, the show that is dedicated to you, the enterprise professional, the IT pro, and that geek who just wants to know how this world is connected. I'm your host, Louis Maresca, your guide through this big, giant world of the enterprise, but I definitely can't guide you by myself. I need to bring in the professionals, the experts in their field, and the people who bring extreme experience from the field, starting with our very own Mr. Curtis Franklin, Senior Editor at Dark Reading. Curtis, how's the Sunshine State treating you?
Well, the Sunshine State is treating us pretty well. We're still in recovery mode after the big RSA conference, but I think we've survived that. Had a couple of great stories coming out of that this week. More to come, so we're going to call it a win in just about every direction.
Fantastic. Thanks for being here, as always. Well, speaking of security, we have another security expert as well, Mr. Brian McHenry, Director of Global Security Solutions over there at F5 Network. Bam. Welcome back to the show. How's the East Coast treating you?
Pretty good. You know, you can't decide whether it wants to be winter or spring yet, but we're doing all right. And I, too, came out of RSA unscathed. And despite the somewhat lower attendance at RSA this year, the F5 booth was pretty hopping with really serious security questions, and probably due in no small part to having acquired Shape Security just a month or so ago.
Fantastic. Well, hopefully we'll get more into RSA in this show as well as in coming shows. But you know what? Curtis is going to bring some of that experience back to us, whether it's, hey, is there a perfect travel program out there or not? And so he's going to bring back whether that is true. There's a session that they did at RSA to go over that. Plus, the coronavirus is in effect and is affecting a lot of areas and a lot of facets of the market. So we're going to talk about how it's actually affecting businesses and the technology sector. Plus, we have a great guest, Skylar Talley, Associate Director, Product Management and Development over there at AT&T Cybersecurity, talk about managed threat detection and response. But first, like we always do, we had a really big week of enterprise news, so let's go ahead and jump into this week's blips. Now, operating system code tends to have a long life. Why? Well, because it's well thought out, it's well written, and well tested, but for the most part. But except when you find a 17-year-old remote code execution vulnerability in it. Now, I don't think engineers and developers were thinking about remote code execution vulnerabilities 17 years ago, but just recently, the U.S. CERT today issued an advisory warning users of a new dangerous 17-year-old remote code execution flaw affecting the PPE Daemon software that comes installed as all Linux-based operating systems, as well as powers the firmware of many other networking devices. Now, the affected PPD software is implementation of what they call point-to-point protocol, PPP, that enables the communication data transfers between nodes. Now, it's primarily used to establish internet links such as those over dial-up modems like back in the day, DSL broadband connections, and VPNs. Now, discovered by an IO active security researcher, the critical issue is a stack buffer overflow vulnerability that exists due to logical error in the extensible authentication protocol, or EAP. Now, the vulnerability is tracked as CVE 2020-597 with a CVSS score of 9.8. It's pretty high, which can be exploited by unauthenticated attackers to remotely execute arbitrary code on the effective system and actually taking fully control of it. Now, additionally, since PPPD often runs with high privileges and works in conjunction with kernel drivers, the flaw could allow attackers to potentially execute malicious code with the system or root level privileges. Now, what Linux distribution does this affect, you may be wondering? Well, it's known in Debian, Ubuntu, SUSE, Fedora, NetBSD, and Red Hat. A lot of them out there. Now, on top of those vanilla OSs, it's also affecting a bunch of different devices that use different variants of the Linux OS, like Cisco's Call Manager, TP-Link products, OpenWRT, which are on some routers out there, and Synology products. Now, the good thing here is there's no attack using this vulnerability just yet. Now this vulnerability is public. It really is only a matter of time. Now, once the fix is provided for the kernel in your version of the OS, it will become a race against the time to get things patched. Now, do yourself a favor. If you're an organization that has devices with Linux on it, or you have Linux on your machines, watch for the update streams for fixes in the near future.
Well, attackers are distributing malware under the guise of security certificate updates. You know, cyber criminals sure can be an innovative bunch when it comes to finding new ways to distribute malware. The latest example is a new campaign involving the use of a fake digital certificate update to try and infect systems of visitors to previously compromised websites. Security vendor Kaspersky on Thursday reported that its researchers had recently observed visitors to various websites being greeted with a warning about the site's security certificate having expired and being invited to download an updated one instead. Users who fell for this ended up downloading malware on their systems. The campaign appears to have started around mid-January and impacted visitors to several websites, including one belonging to a zoo and another to an auto parts dealer. According to Kaspersky, the campaign is the first one its researchers have encountered where the attackers are attempting to distribute malware in the guise of a website security update. Because the address listed in the iframe is, in fact, the real address of the website, the natural instinct for users is to install the recommended certificate so they can view the content they're trying to get to. In the new campaign that Kaspersky observed, attackers are distributing Mokes and Burak, to previously known pieces of malware. Mokes is a backdoor from several years ago that can be used to download other malware, steal credentials, and intercept data that users might enter into a web form. The malware, referred to by some as smoke loader, can also be used to install shell code on an infected computer. Burak, well, it's similar and can be used to spread other malware, including crypto mining software, ransomware, remote access trojans, and key loggers.
Earlier this week, LetsEncrypt announced that it would revoke roughly 3 million, 2.6% of its currently active certificates. They're now delaying that revocation in the interest of quote-unquote internet health. Approximately 36 hours were available from the announcement to the planned revocation, giving unlucky sysadmins precious little time to react. With time winding down before the revocation and 1 million certificates still not renewed, a stay of execution was granted by LetsEncrypt. The revocations were necessitated by a bug in the LetsEncrypt CA code. While the security risk posed wasn't massive, LetsEncrypt made the right move to address the issue before the bug could be exploited in any unforeseen manner. The remaining unrenewed certificates haven't been given a hard deadline to this grace period, but LetsEncrypt is serious about getting these vulnerable certificates out of the ecosystem. This type of swift response is what makes LetsEncrypt's strategy of 90-day expirations and automated issuance, revocation, and renewal of certificates a really powerful tool in making sure one of the core aspects of internet security, encrypted data transport via TLS or HTTPS, as secure as it can be.
So there's been a discovery of an unfixable bootrom security flaw in millions of Intel chips, which actually could spell utter chaos for DRM, file encryption, and other areas. Now, it's actually quite a fascinating vulnerability, though actually it's non-trivial to abuse in practical sense. Now, it cannot be fixed without replacing the silicon, only mitigated, and it's claimed that the design flaw is baked into millions of Intel processor chips manufactured over the past 5 years. Now, the problem revolves around cryptographic keys that, if obtained, can be used to break the root trust in a system. Now, buried deep inside the modern Intel chipset is what they call a management engine, or these days the Converged Security and Manageability Engine, as CSME. Now, it's a miniature computer within your computer. It has its own CPU, its own RAM, its own code in the boot ROM, and access to the rest of the machine. Now, the interesting thing here is, like a little digital janitor, the CSME works behind the scenes below the operating system, the hypervisor, and firmware, performing lots of crucial low-level tasks, such as bringing up the computer, controlling power levels, starting the main chip processor chips, verifying and booting the motherboard firmware, and providing a cryptographic function. Now, the engine is the first thing to run when the machine is switched on, and one of the many first things it does is actually set up memory protections on its own built-in RAM so that the other hardware and software can't interfere with it. Now, during that timing gap is where a lot of the vulnerability is. Other hardware physically attached or present on the motherboard that is able to fire off DRM transfers in the CMSE's private RAM may do so, overriding variables and pointers and hijacking its execution. Now, at that point, the CSME can be commandeered for malicious purposes, all out of the view of the software running above it. Now, how should you and your organization protect yourself against this crazy vulnerability? Well, Intel says folks should install the firmware level mitigations, maintain physical possession of their platform, and adopt best security practices by installing updates as soon as they become available and being continually vigilant to detect and prevent intrusions and exploitations. This seems to be the theme in this day and age. Wait to be vaccinated while being exposed.
Well, in something new for enterprise security and HR officials to be aware of, an anonymous developer has created a search engine for the dark web that will make searching for questionable and illegal goods and services easier. He was borrowing from the previously popular Graham's search engine that shut down 2 years ago. The search engine, dubbed Kilos, borrows a lot of design elements from and improves on the functionality of the Graham search engine, extensively indexing 6 different dark markets. While other search engines, such as AMIA, Onion Search Engine, and Fresh Onions have appeared over the past few years, Kilos appears to trump them in terms of functionality. Products and services are sold in a handful of major dark markets made up of sellers of gray market and black market goods and services on the dark web, which uses Tor or another anonymization service to keep users' identities and the source of transactions a secret. In addition, the developers normally pair the service with a Bitcoin tumbler or mixer, a method of combining Bitcoin transactions into pools to anonymize the identities of the buyers. Kilos developer appears to be following the Graham's playbook because, in addition to the search engine functionality, the developer has announced its own Bitcoin mixing service dubbed Crumble. To help prevent denial of service attacks and competitors from scraping, the developers of Kilos have implemented a CAPTCHA that asks users to rank product and vendor feedback by whether the review is positive or negative. The CAPTCHA serves a secondary function as well, giving the developers additional data to train the software's machine learning algorithm and improve that dark web search function.
So winter of 2019 is almost in the rearview mirror, and we're seeing cyber threats targeting Asia. F5 Labs, in conjunction with partner Baffin Bay Networks, researches global attack traffic region to region to gain a deeper understanding of the cyber threat landscape. Aside from attack campaigns targeting the entire internet IPv4 address space, the attack landscape varies regionally in terms of sources, targets, and attack types. In addition, targeted ports expose regional difference in IT norms when it comes to the way non-standard ports are used for HTTP and SSH. In this latest data collection, they looked at malicious traffic over the same 90-day period, October 1st, 2019 through December 31st, 2019, in the US, Canada, Europe, Russia, Middle East, Asia, excluding China, and Australia. The sensor and tracking system is constantly evolving, which gives them a unique snapshot of the threat landscape at any given time. The attack landscape targeting systems in Asia during the winter of 2019 was characterized by a large volume of traffic coming from within the region, specifically Singapore. French cloud computing company OVH SAS, with IP addresses geographically located in Singapore, launched the most attack traffic towards any system in Asia. Credential stuffing attacks targeting RFB/VNC port 5900, noted in the fall of 2019, continued during this time period. They were launched through networks in Russia, France, and Moldova, and targets were not unique to systems in Asia. These attacks were felt all over the world. 50% of the countries in the top attacking source countries list are in Asia, with IP addresses located in Singapore only targeting systems in Asia. The top targeted port, SMB port 445, and the third most attacked port, SSH port 22, were commonly targeted across the world because exploiting a vulnerability on either of these services can give a malicious actor access to the entire system. Many of these attacks are directly thwarted by good firewall rules, ensuring no unnecessary ports or protocols are left open and listening on untrusted networks like the internet. And when a protocol must be exposed, ensure that it is authenticated and with strong authentication policies in place. These may seem like basic pieces of security advice, but it's clear that the traffic being sourced from cloud compute platforms like OVH SSH, among many others, the default security posture of these cloud installations is often wide open.
Now, a lot of web services, sites, apps, and social sites are being targeted with a misdirection when it comes to malicious sites that might have similar names to the ones they actually use. Now, in the case of Facebook, there's an endless supply of these things. Sites like InstagramBusinessHelp.com or FacebookLogin.com or WhatsAppDownload.site. Now, the reason these are bad is that malicious actors can send out comms from these domains, making it look like they actually signed by the real provider. Now, Facebook is out to stop this type of attack. Now, Facebook filed a suit this week against Namecheap, one of the biggest domain name registrars on the internet. Now, the social networking giant claims that Namecheap has actually refused to cooperate in an investigation into a series of malicious domains that have been registered through its service, which impersonate the Facebook brand. Now, Christian Dubois, the director of Associate General Counsel at Facebook, said today that Facebook engineers tracked down 45 suspicious Facebook lookalike domains registered through Namecheap, which had the owner's details hidden through the company's WhoIsGuard service. Now, domains like these, which abuse the Facebook brand, are often used for phishing, fraud, and scam. Now, Namecheap provided these seems to be taking the privacy angle here and has put out a statement. Listen to this. Now, Namecheap takes every fraud and abuse allegation extremely serious and diligently investigates each reported case and abuse. We want to be clear. We actively remove any evidence-based abuse of our services on a daily basis. Where there is no clear evidence of use or it's purely a trademark claim, Namecheap will direct complaints such as Facebook to follow industry standard protocol. Now, outside that protocol, a legal court order is always required to provide private user information. Now, Facebook may be willing to tread over all the customers' privacy on their own platform, and in this case, it appears they want companies to do that for them with their own customers. Now, this is just another attack on privacy and due process in order to strong-arm companies that have services like WhoIsGuard intended to protect millions of internet users' privacy. Now, the question is, who's right here? Namecheap or Facebook? Think about it. Well, folks, that does it for the blips. Next up, the bites. But before we get to the bites, we have to thank a really great sponsor of This Week in Enterprise Tech, and that's Thanks to Canary. We all know that hackers take the path of least resistance, right? It's always saying that maybe your weakest link in your organization might be your users, but there's a lot of other weak links out there. And in fact, it takes about 191 days on average for a company to actually realize they've been breached and those weak links actually be exposed. Well, get ready, because Thanks Canary has a great solution that will make it easy for you to catch those breachers in the act. Now, you and I hear about new breaches every day, and they're trending upwards. They're going up. They're moving. There's lots more coming. The companies spend millions of dollars on IT security, but they still don't know when they're actually compromised. Take the Marriott hotels. 500 million guests were affected by their breach over a 4-year period. Now, that's where Thinks Canary steps in. These honeypot appliances are actually super awesome. You sprinkle a couple of them devices on your network, and when there's a breach, you're alerted immediately. Now, back in 2000, people talked about using honeypots, but they weren't easy to deploy and use and set up. Now, Canary has made this simple with zero administration and management overhead. Now, canaries can be set up in under 4 minutes, and within minutes of configuration, they have lots of use. Now, here's how Canary works. It looks identical to a router, a switch, a NAS server, a Linux box, or a Windows server to attackers, and they can't tell the difference. Now, Thinks Canary they actually don't look vulnerable on your network. They look valuable and they look appealing to those hackers. You can put fake files on them or enroll them in Active Directory. And when attackers investigate further, they give themselves away and you're instantly notified. Now, Thinks Canary, the company behind canaries, has been fighting back in the security game for over 2 decades. They training companies, militaries, and governments on how to break into networks, and they've used that experience to build Canary. Now, if you want to try right now, visit canary.tools/twit for just $7,500 per year. You'll get 5 canaries, your own hosted console, upgrades, support, and maintenance. And if you use code TWIT in the How Do You Hear About Us box, you'll get 10% off the price for life. We know you love Thinks Canary, but if you're not happy, you can always return your canaries within 2-month money-back guarantee for a full refund. That's canary.tools/twit and enter the code TWIT and How Do You Hear About Us box. And we thank Thinks Canary for their support in This Week in Enterprise Tech. Well, folks, let's go ahead and jump into the bites. Now, having worked from home for a while now, and I have the next 3 weeks to think about that as well, I can definitely say that the coronavirus is affecting my work. In fact, it's affecting all facets of the market. Well, Curtis is going to take us through just how much it's affecting businesses as well. Curtis?
Thanks, Lou. And well, while the coronavirus is not technically enterprise technology in and of itself, you knew that we were going to have to talk about it. Microsoft announced on February 26 that it was revising its revenue guidance for the third quarter of fiscal year 20. And that's only the latest warning that the COVID-19 coronavirus is having a larger than anticipated impact on global business. Microsoft's announcement followed Apple's, which issued a similar update to its quarterly guidance on February 17th. Both companies give a variety of reasons for their revenue forecast, but they share a single root cause, which is a slowing of supply chain ramp-up following the Lunar or Chinese New Year. Apple said that while their iPhone manufacturing partner sites were located outside the Hubei province, and while all of those facilities have reopened, the reopening and ramping up was happening more slowly than anticipated. Therefore, they didn't expect to meet their personal computing segment guidance. And Microsoft said something similar because of slowdowns in the Windows OEM and Surface manufacturing. Now, the difference is right there. Apple is notifying on their own manufacturing supply chain. With Microsoft, much of theirs is based on the supply chain for the hardware manufacturers on which copies of Windows and Office will be loaded. Other companies, including HP and Intel, have come out with similar announcements. And lest you think that this is all about the tech sector, other companies like, for example, Coca-Cola has expressed concerns about the effects of coronavirus on its operations and has reported that supply chain challenges could impact its sugar-free beverages such as Diet Coke, for which some ingredients are sourced from China. I'll say on a personal note, if it hits things like Coke Zero and Pepsi Zero, I'm going to start taking it very, very seriously. Now, this isn't just about the supply chain, because consumers are involved as well. Goldman Sachs put out a research report, How Coronavirus Will Impact U.S. Equities, and said that U.S. companies will generate no earnings growth in 2020, and that the investment firm had updated its earnings model to incorporate the likelihood that the virus will become widespread. On the other hand, they did say that companies with high U.S. sales will outperform companies with high international sales. Now, that demand side of the supply chain is also considerable. They say, they being Goldman Sachs, that under their baseline, COVID-19 will affect earnings growth through supply chain disruptions and weak end demand. They gave, a pessimistic possibility when they looked at the possibility that the economic impact of COVID-19 could lead to a recession. They said, if COVID-19 spreads rapidly, supply chain delays could persist, U.S. consumer demand could plummet, and firms could lay off workers in an effort to maintain margins. The report also said that if the outbreak stays mostly in China, economic activity could return to normal levels in the second quarter. I think we're on the verge of seeing that particular rosy possibility not be the most likely. And the U.S. Centers for Disease Control have said something similar. They've said it will continue to spread in the U.S., although they have no way of knowing exactly how much. Even if the spread of the disease in the U.S. is limited, they say a significant spread outside the U.S. will still be disruptive. I'll say in my particular company's case, we are the world's largest producer of trade shows and events, and it is beginning to have an impact on our events, and therefore we are managing things all around the world. We're not alone. It's just one of those things that is hitting companies far across all market segments. Now, I want to turn to my co-hosts, and Bam, I want to start with you. We're seeing the world technology supply chain being affected. Are you seeing any impact on your part of the technology world from COVID-19?
So I work in technology sales. So I'm on the sales side of F5's business, helping train all of our technical salespeople. And I can tell you there's a slowdown, right, in terms of presence at RSA. We mentioned RSA earlier in the show, and certainly much less attendance. The show floor, I didn't see any official counts compared to prior years, but as a veteran of RSA, I can tell you that it was the least crowded show floor I've ever seen. And that affects sales. That's where a lot of times customers finally have the time to go and visit new vendors and explore new technologies, and connections are made. People might make light of trade shows, being places for people to just go and fill up bags full of swag, and certainly there's a component there. But a lot of business does get done at large shows like RSA and smaller shows, and professional chapter meetings for technology professionals. And then just as the other day, I had a couple of meetings that were moved from in-person meetings to remote meetings at the customer's request. So it's not just the supply chain on the back end on how we build and distribute our hardware and software in the technology business, but it's also on the front end, is how do we connect with our customers and help them figure out what they want to do, what purchasing decisions they made. And so things could be delayed or put off entirely based on the fact that they don't have the access to the people and the information they need.
Well, that's an interesting point, that this is not just about sales opportunities. It's about getting information that's transferred in the conferences and in all those conversations that happen in the hallways and in the restaurants around that. Here in Orlando, we're beginning to see some large conferences like the HIMSS conference around healthcare information management cancel. And there have been stories about the massive impact on, for example, the wages of servers in the restaurants around the convention center. Lou, I want to turn to you. We've heard that companies in the Pacific Northwest are urging or even requiring their employees to stay home. Are you seeing an impact from this?
Absolutely. I think that Microsoft is urging employees to stay home till late March. I think Facebook's doing the same. Amazon and a lot of other companies are following suit here. And I think one of the reason being is they just know that, especially these types of companies, they are set up to work remotely. Like the engineers can do it, the PMs can do it, the UX teams can do it. We have the tools, and it leads me to that Ghostbuster thing. We have the tools, we have the talent. It's Miller time, but but I think that we do have both of those things, and I think it's really important that organizations go through this and be able to test those types of tools to make sure that they can do this and be productive. But there's going to be some issues. I mean, a lot of teams, I talk to a lot of people that work at Amazon, is if you haven't worked remotely before, it does create a little bit of entropy into your normal daily life, and so your normal work life, and so you have to get kind of used to that. It's a little bit of learning, but I think that companies will see progress here. Now, the interesting thing is, you're right, it does affect a lot of conferences and things going on. Like, for instance, Microsoft has an MVP summit that's supposed to be going on like the week of the 18th here, and so people were going to fly in globally who are MVPs of Microsoft services and products. And now that's no longer a actual in-person conference. It's now an online conference. So they're actually swapping and switching in. And so now we have to get ready to do online sessions and get them, the material ready for that, and as well as get the streaming services to scale out and be ready for all that. So it does shift it a little bit. But I think we might see more of a shift towards that kind of virtual presence and virtual collaboration and conference to be able to spread that and disseminate that information a little bit better, a little easier than having to travel globally. But you're right. I think the social aspects of those conferences and the ad hoc conversations and that kind of thing will go on the wayside here. It'll be a lot harder to do those types of things. So it should be interesting to see how things evolve over time here.
I agree with you. And the tumblers continue to fall. While we are recording this, I just got news via one of the members of our audience that South by Southwest just pulled the plug. That is a huge event in Austin, and they had been promising to go on, but obviously they have sort of bowed to the inevitable. We're seeing a lot of changes. Now, in my case, I've been working remotely for a very long time, for decades. So this is pretty much business as usual for me. And frankly, I'm fortunate in working for a company that's invested pretty heavily in both having a fair number of employees who work remotely and investing in the technology to allow others to work remotely when they need to. But not all companies are like that. This is a huge deal. Bam, I want to get to you with one final question real quickly. U.S. trade officials have said that they see a positive coming from this, in that it might very well hasten the return of some manufacturing to the U.S., bringing some of those supply chains back domestically. Do you see in the research you do around the industry any indication that that's going to happen, or do you think that coronavirus is too much a short-term impact to really have a long-term impact on supply chains?
Well, I think it'll have some long-term impact, but it's certainly, when we say hasten, right, it's on a relative pace. Something that was going to take decades may now take less decades to do. There are other aspects, supply chain wise, where China has certain advantages such as access to certain raw materials that are critical to the manufacture of computer components, cheap steel, things of that nature that that go further down the supply chain that affect certain types of manufacturing upstream. So while yes, I think this will have some effect, as well as sort of the global political climate, I'm not looking for any kind of immediate impact where overnight we're going to start to see jobs come back to places where they manufacturing jobs come back to places where they've been gone for some time. Hate to be that negative on it. I would love to say that there are manufacturing jobs coming back post haste. However, the caveat I'll add is we seem to be, as with other types of weather phenomenon, more of these types of pandemic outbreaks happening more and more often, and depending on how long it is between COVID-19 and whatever is the next one, that probably is the thing that's worth watching. Like if we get all the way through 2020 without another pandemic, I think this thing kind of dies off. It becomes a thing that we talk about at the end of the year. Say, hey, I remember when that happened. Whereas if we have another one, say in the middle of the summer, which could be with warmer weather, could potentially be a bigger problem. That might be the thing that really accelerates things. But for right now, I'm looking at this as more of an isolated incident.
Well, I certainly hope so. And on that cheerful note, we're going to pivot away from viruses and talk about travel laptop programs. Now, at RSA last week, I attended a conference session that had the promise of implementing the perfect travel laptop program. That's what was on the next to the door. And then the speaker, Brian Warshawski, who's manager of export control compliance at the University of California Office of the President, came on stage and began to speak. There's really no such thing as a perfect travel program, he opened with, and well, all righty. What there is, he said, was a very good travel program. And the key to that is balance. Now, he went through a lot of different steps because what he does is help develop the programs that University of California researchers use when they travel internationally. And believe me, if you've ever traveled internationally with technical professionals, you know that there's all kinds of interesting information on those systems and all kinds of nations who want to see that information. He pointed out that government's willingness to take data as it comes in and out of the country on electronic devices means that organizations need to ask themselves a series of questions. Is the data and information contained on the device worth more than the device itself? In other words, if push comes to shove, are you willing to see the device destroyed in order to protect the data that's on it? What are the local laws in the country being entered? And let's be really specific here. He was not talking about the two endpoints of the travel, the originating country and the destination, but every country through which you transit. What are the laws there? What's the result to both the individual and the organization if all the data on the device were compromised or released to a government entity? Keep that in mind. All the data, not just the specific data that's going for the business purpose of the trip, but everything. And finally, what's the effect of all of this on device encryption? Now, he said these are the foundation questions. There are plenty more. And it's not just the sort of oppressive regimes and third world, lesser developed nations that we have to worry about. He pointed out that London's Heathrow Airport is one that's infamous for being a place where travelers have their devices probed. Why is that? Well, if you've ever traveled through Heathrow, you know it is about 79 miles long. And to get from one gate to another, you often must go outside of security, get on a bus, go to another terminal, come back in through security. And it's at that point where you're coming back in through security that officials can touch your hardware and decide that they need to see absolutely everything on it. Now, there are many levels of data that you have to worry about, not only proprietary data, and that goes for things like the data behind the report or the speech that you're going to give, but things that might be personal information. You know, in the U.S., we have a very liberal view of things like political cartoons, political speech, satire. Those things are not universal. And the cartoon that could be hilariously funny in the break room at the office could be a jailable offense in some other country. So that leads to another set of questions. So what is on the device? And be very specific and very all-encompassing. Who owns the information on the device? Who owns the device itself? How's it being used and secure? Here's an important one. Why is that particular device needed overseas, and where will it be located and for how long? Because if you're a technical professional or a scientific professional and you leave a device, say a laptop computer or a tablet in a hotel room, there's a very high likelihood that someone besides the hotel housekeeping staff is going to look at it. To get through all of this, you need to go through pre-travel briefings and have these very well organized and regimented. Pre-travel surveys asking the question, organizational guides that tell travelers what they should do, forms and acknowledgments that are signed, and finally travel letters that indicate that the traveler has the organization's approval for carrying devices and information overseas. Now, Bam, I'm going to come to you with a question because I know that you have done international travel. Is everything that I'm talking about here, does this sound like overkill to you, or does this sound familiar and really sort of reasonable when it comes to carrying technical information across international boundaries?
So I think I'd have to come back to my mantra of things that affect user experience, or in this case, business process, better provide really, really bulletproof security if you're going to put that much friction in the process. So I think, there's probably a component of really good advice here in terms of, doing, this sounds a little bit like, user awareness training for, helping people avoid phishing and avoid other, social engineering and things of that nature. But at the end of the day, if you're instituting these policies, you better make not only sure that they're bulletproof or provide like a really measurably higher level of security, but that they don't make it harder for people to travel and do business. That would be my number one concern when listening to a policy like this. If I'm the CIO or even a CISO, this type of policy, I'm going to be scrutinized for like, all right, tell me what percentage of breach or how much lower is my risk going to be if we follow this policy to a T? Because it really does seem to chase the human component, right? Again, I'll call back RSA, the theme of RSA this year, the human element. Certainly something that I would think about here is, do you think you really can alter user behavior in a way that's meaningful, that affects your overall security posture? I think, certain things that we do already as standard practice, many enterprises do as standard practice today in terms of restricting access or providing step-up authentication when a user is abroad are very effective. Full disk encryption on corporate issue devices, providing mobile device management for personal devices brought to the organization. There's a number of things that are being done today, technology-wise, that are much less dependent upon a user, being smart and doing the right things 100% of the time.
Well, there are all kinds of things to consider with a program like this, and we could talk further, but we have a great guest coming up. I will say one thing. You talked about encryption. It's worth noting that there are some very strong encryptions that cannot be taken legally to a number of nations. So that's yet another thing to be aware of. Make sure that your encryption can be exported around the world before you go full in on its use. Well, with that, it's time to turn it back over to Lou. Lou, I suspect we have an ad, and I know we have a great guest coming up.
Thank you, Curt, very much. We do have a great ad, and we also have a great guest, so we'll get to them really soon. But before we do, we have to thank a really great sponsor of This Week in Enterprise Tech, and that is IT Pro TV. Now, you are a busy professional, right? I'm a busy professional. You're a busy professional. It can definitely be difficult to learn new skills or even develop skills to make it clear for a career change. Well, IT Pro TV has made learning IT and finishing IT certifications possible. You'll be able to learn quickly and at your own pace, and be able to learn on your own time. Now, IT Pro TV really has super interesting content because it offers binge-worthy learning for IT professionals and always keeps their content fresh, that the IT world is constantly changing. Now, it's in their core values to have content that's current, relevant, and up to date. Now, they are continuously filming out of their 6 high-def studios, providing you with training for what's in the IT field today. Now, you'll get the latest exam objectives, new certifications, updated software releases, redesigned interfaces, and more. Now, another reason and another awesome feature is that they have free members can actually watch the daily live stream at no cost. That's right. Jump on the stream, watch it as they go. Now, it's watch as it's created here. Now, IT Pro TV founders Tim Broom and Don Pizzette actually created IT Pro TV because it's the IT training they wanted themselves. That's right. They wanted training, and they thought, well, what better way to get that training than to create some of it ourselves? Now, it's conversational, it's affordable, and it's very convenient to you. Now, there are over 4,000 hours of IT training that they actually offer, and they offer the official video training partner of CompTIA, and they have 12 CompTIA on-demand courses, including CompTIA 8+, Network Plus, and Security Plus certifications. Now, I'm constantly learning, and great content like this helps me stay engaged, learn new things and sometimes challenging topics, and it makes it fast and efficient. Get more out of your career by growing your knowledge base and learning something new. See how IT Pro TV can make it easy for you to grow your career. Visit itpro.tv/enterprise and use code enterprise30 to receive 30% off. That's itpro.tv/enterprise and use code enterprise30 for an additional 30% off for the lifetime of your active subscription. IT Pro TV, build or expand your IT career and enjoy the journey. And we thank IT Pro TV for their support of This Week in Enterprise Tech. Well, folks, it's my favorite part of the show. We actually get to bring a guest to drop some knowledge on the Twiat Ride. And today we have Skylar Talley, Associate Director, Product Management and Development with AT&T. Welcome to the show, Skylar.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, we have a lot to talk about here, but before we do that, our audience loves to hear people's origin stories and kind of their journey through tech. Can you maybe take us on a short journey through tech and what brought you to AT&T?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was actually not on this path at all. I was getting a finance degree from the University of Texas at Austin, and started kind of dabbling in the startup scene my senior year, and ended up in a product management role with a marketplace startup here. Had a couple of other jobs in between that, and then ultimately decided that I wanted to get into the security space and then also start to understand SaaS business models. So joined Alien Vault in the beginning of 2017. We were just launching our flagship product, USM Anywhere, at that time. We had an appliance-based product that had done really well in the market, and we're trying to capitalize on that success and move over to a SaaS deployment model. So I kind of got on that train, and it was a really fun ride. And then AT&T kind of came to the door mid 2018, and that acquisition was completed Q3 around the July timeframe of 18, and we've really kind of reformed as AT&T Cybersecurity. So that's the kind of the go-to-market that you see now, and a lot of the old Alien Vault team is in leadership positions and product development positions within AT&T, and we're really trying to go to market with a kind of a portfolio approach that we've restructured and previewed at RSA and Black Hat over the past year or so.
Fantastic. Now, we hear a lot about, obviously, cybersecurity is a big topic. So we hear a lot about these different portfolios that really can help customers bootstrap their efforts here. And one particular thing is the concept of managed detection and response. Can you maybe go through a little bit about what AT&T feels and what the definition is for them when it comes to managed detection and response?
Yeah, so going back to the context of the acquisition, that was one of the first areas that we thought it would make sense to kind of use the Alien Vault technology and AT&T's experience as an MSSP to really make a statement in the market. And so for us, our definition and how we've replatformed the offer and relaunched it is we have our USM Anywhere technology platform. And then we have a managed operations team that comes on site, helps you understand your unique risk profile, deploys that technology, and then is managing that technology on a day-to-day basis for you. And so kind of the core sort of value metric is, what are the alarms that are being produced by your detection technology, and then how are you responding to those? And then how are you keeping the customer's IT and security team in the loop? So there's, a lot of different variants of that in the market from a technology and then an MSS standpoint. But our flagship is based off of USM Anywhere and is this managed threat detection response offer that I'm responsible for.
Fantastic. Now, so one of the interesting things that you said that is things are constantly hard to detect. They're constantly hard to manage. Now, one thing I'm interested about here is how is it actually changing when it comes to mobile? Like, how are security ops and teams actually managing the fact that people are making mistakes here because of mobile devices, and so how is it getting easier or harder from these types of suites?
Yeah, I think, we haven't invested a lot from an integration on a threat standpoint in the mobile side because we feel like that what you're accessing via mobile, whether it's, to use your previous example from earlier in the episode, whether it's phishing, that we're going to get visibility into that via the network maybe that once that attacker has a foothold, then they start communicating out to command and control server, something along those lines. So it's not exactly visibility into the mobile device if you feel like you have a good foothold in the network and good detection mechanisms that should an attacker be able to start to get into the environment and begin to move laterally, that you're going to be able to catch it there. Now, I think that probably changes very shortly. But in regards to how it changes our fundamental technology, we continue to invest in network visibility, host level visibility, and user visibility. And then once you kind of have that trifecta, as long as those detection mechanisms are in place, we don't have visibility into the devices at a really granular level just yet.
Right. And the interesting thing about the trifecta is a lot of organizations don't have that, right? I want to maybe throw it to you and talk to you about, hey, what are the common mistakes here that people or an enterprise manager are making, both in SecOps and in DevOps?
Yeah, I think you're not, a lot of times let's start at kind of a higher level in the business context. You're not really tying back your security strategy to your key business function. What is key for you from a continuity standpoint, from a revenue generation standpoint? What are your kind of crown jewels? And then what is the technology surface area at play there? And what are the unique threat vectors for that technology surface area? And how are we approaching that? How are we actually mitigating that? What's our risk appetite? I don't think that a lot of organizations that I've seen really are approaching the conversation with business leadership and board leadership that way. And that's why you kind of see an underspend in security overall. And maybe let's call it a reactionary spend, where somebody in my immediate vertical gets compromised or a competitor gets compromised, or worst case, you get compromised, then you decide to invest in it. So instead of being proactive and framing it to the business in the form of business risk, you're relying on something bad happening near to you or within your organization to then take security seriously. So that's kind of the first mistake. And I still think, all research points to the weakest vector being the user. And so you have companies like KnowBe4 that have raised a lot of venture capital over the past year to really scale out user training on best practices. And you kind of guys were just discussing it earlier in the episode. What are our best practices when we're traveling? How do we think about email best practices? How can you loop in IT and security teams? If something seems wrong, what should you be looking for? Really, so how do you justify to the business to continue to spend money on additional detection, response, protection? And then also, how do you invest in user training? I think those are kind of the two big buckets of risk that we see pretty commonly.
Makes sense. Now, the interesting thing here is a lot of people say, hey, like we're just starting to implement and we're starting to build products and ship products and services, and we're starting to implement DevOps. And the fact is there could be and is a bunch of similarities between DevOps and SecOps. Can you maybe tell us if some of this is converging or what are the similarities and how are organizations handling them?
I think those two teams are starting to really talk to each other, right? In a way that I haven't seen before. My career in security is somewhat limited, over the past 3.5 years. But one of the main drivers for that I've seen is compliance. What compliance regimes are you under, and how do they think about your continuous development, continuous integration processes from a security standpoint and the checks that you need to have in play? So for me, if you think about drivers of innovation there, that's the main one that I've been seeing that is causing those two teams. I don't know if necessarily converge is the right word, but at least
sure.
that IT and SecOps are becoming part of the DevOps conversation, whether it's just a check the box type conversation or, we just went through our FedRAMP certification it took us almost over a year, different third-party auditing parties coming in to look at our full pipeline, our entire AWS infrastructure, audit that, make some changes so that we can have a FedRAMP certified deployment model. That's expensive. And it's a big effort. And so it's I would say that SecOps is really starting to affect DevOps workflow. I'm not sure if they're converging just yet, if that makes sense.
Makes sense. So I do want to bring my co-hosts in because they have a lot of experience here in the enterprise. Curtis, I want to start with you because obviously SecOps is an important area and you cover this a lot. What are you seeing?
Well, I've got a question because and it's something that I ask a lot of people who are in this space. When you're talking about the technology that you're bringing to the party, do you see this as being a replacement for some of the people in the process, or are you primarily focused on augmenting the abilities and the intelligence of the human beings who are already involved in the process?
I see it as augmenting, and this is also a bit organization size specific. So I'll kind of bring it back to a practical example. A lot of times, and I'm going to speak from a managed detection response service angle, not just the implementation of maybe a SIEM or a security orchestration and automation platform, but a kind of topic of the interview, an MDR type service. On the smaller side of the scale, business size, a lot of times they don't have that role in place right now. They don't have a 24/7 security operations center that is continually monitoring infrastructure, looking at threats and remediating those. So that is kind of a net new function, let's call it. On the mid to large size enterprise, what we're seeing very much is on the staff augmentation model. So how they have an existing security team or SOC team even in place today, but they want to get that team maybe up-leveled to do a bit more strategic work and provide strategic security guidance, maybe working with that DevOps function or something along those lines. So I would just say it's not necessarily a straightforward answer, and it depends on the needs of the organization and really their security maturity of where they're at right now, of whether it's an augmentation and very rarely are we replacing people, to be honest. There's a labor shortage in security. And so often we're dealing with that with the end customer versus replacing headcount, I would say.
Well, but when we come back, we do want to talk a little bit more about that. But before we do, we have to thank another great sponsor of This Week in Enterprise Tech, and that's Worldwide Technology. If you ever get a chance to visit Worldwide Technology Advanced Technology Center, you should definitely go. It's a truly amazing site. In fact, a bunch of people from Twit actually made a journey out there to check it out, and they were completely amazed at this site. They began building it almost 10 years ago, and it's grown exponentially. It's really like no other testing and research lab you've ever seen. Now, listen to what the lab contains. More than $500 million in equipment from hundreds of OEMs and key partners, ranging from high-tech heavyweights like F5, Red Hat, and Cisco to emerging disruptors like Equinix. Now, when you are developing products, you want to work with an organization you can trust, right? Well, WWT is that trusting partner who will stay with you over the years. In fact, many of their customers have been with them for over a decade because they know WWT is where they can go to get the answers they need and make sure their business runs right. With all that it has to offer, the ATC really is an incubator for IT innovation. Let's know what else it has to offer. On-demand and schedulable labs like WWT's F5 Red Hat OpenShift Lab enable customers to get hands-on access and step-by-step learning on emerging IT architectures and technologies around topics such as Kubernetes, infrastructure automation with Ansible, and application security with F5 Advanced Web Application Firewall. Now, you've worked on large products before, right? Well, sometimes you want to try things out before you build products and bring things to market. While the ATC can really help you learn about products before you launch, WWT's engineers use these environments to quickly spin up proof of concepts and pilots using the ATC's lab environment so customers can confidently select the best solutions. Now, in many cases, this reduces concept time from months to weeks, which increases your speed to market. Now, they offer lab as a service. It's a dedicated lab space within the ATC. Here customers can perform programmatic testing using the vast technology ecosystem that WWT has already built. And it's virtual, so you can take full advantage of the ATC's unique benefits anywhere in the world 24/7. Now, WWT's engineers work in these labs every day, and they beta test new solutions and building reference architectures and customer integrations to help their customers make decisions and see results faster and with much less investment. WWT has launched its new digital platform encompassing the ATC ecosystem. Now, this ecosystem creates a multiplier effect of knowledge, speed, and agility anytime, anywhere around the world for its customers. Get access to articles, case studies, hands-on labs, and other tools that make the difference in today's fast-paced world. To learn more about WWT, the ATC, and become a member of their growing community, go to wwt.com/twit to create an account and gain access to their on-demand labs today. WWT simplifies the complex. That's wwt.com/twit. WWT, delivering business and technology outcomes around the world. And we thank Worldwide Technology for their support in This Week in Enterprise Tech. Well, folks, we've been talking with Skylar Talley, Associate Director in Product Management and Development with AT&T. I do want to bring Curtis back in because, Curtis, I know you had a follow-up on the last discussion topic, so I'll throw it back to you.
Yeah, Skylar, you were talking about the maturity, the security maturity of the organization that is bringing in your technology. And I know that for many organizations, especially as they're going into the DevSecOps model, one of the hard things is getting their developers to really embrace the process of designing in security rather than having it be something that is added at a later stage in the development process. Is that something that your technology actually helps with, or do they pretty much have to have a process in place before your services come in so that they can truly take advantage of this?
So I think it's both in the sense that we're not, our SOC analysts, just to be clear, once we're looking at what's coming out of your environment, aren't going to be advising on necessarily secure CI/CD pipeline type implementations, right? But what we can do is highlight whenever, so say your development environment is in AWS, you're a technology company and you're continually publishing a SaaS product and you want both your development and your production environment monitored 24/7 a day for any privilege escalations, any oddities, any sort of like maybe a DDoS attack, something along those lines. We are going to be a product like and service like ours is going to be that frontline defense mechanism. And whenever we're going through the install process, as we kind of model out the threats that are relevant to you within your business, within your technology stack, we're going to be highlighting those gaps, and we're going to be working with you for how we would detect different attacks. And if ultimately downstream that leads to a better DevOps, SecOps integration within your DevOps process, right, then that's a positive outcome for working with an MDR provider. If you're wanting specific guidance on what the best sort of secure development practices are, that's something more fit for most likely a consulting engagement or specifically somebody that has vertical experience or experience within that vertical and has implemented that previously versus a kind of a pure play MDR product, I would say.
I did want to throw this over to Bam because Bam, you had some questions a little bit about how cloud platforms are actually handling this, right?
Yeah, I think one of the number one things we see is customers want to move to the public cloud now. Rewind 5, 6, 7 years ago, customers were hesitant to move their production workloads into the public cloud platforms, whether it's Azure, GCP, AWS, what have you. Obviously, that's changed dramatically, and increasingly we see production workloads moving into public cloud platforms. But we know that there are certain risks and certain problems that come with moving things to the public cloud platform. So, Skylar, is that could you maybe elaborate on what in the role that AT&T plays? Like, what are you seeing when what are the common challenges you're seeing when your customers are moving workloads into production workloads into the public cloud? Like, what are you seeing are the common pitfalls, and what are the things that you're able to do to help them out?
Yeah. So I think, the one that's topical for me, I was just in a discussion with a large company last month, and they're moving a lot of their IP storage, let's call it, for to use a general term, into AWS, and are having a hard time working with the internal security organization for how they're going to get visible into those workloads. Who's going to be monitoring it? What's kind of the SLAs around that? Those sorts of things. So I think, challenges depending on the size and the maturity of the organization and how up to date, let's call it, how current they are with their monitoring practices, that could be the number one challenge. Is we're going to be spinning up these workloads in AWS or moving this functionality over to a public cloud. What is the integration with the security team, and do they have the skill set to ultimately help us make sure that we're doing what we need to do, dotting our I's and crossing our T's once we have that out in production? Right. So I think that's maybe the number one thing. And then it's also just best practices and guidance. And I think, AWS, Azure, all the major players are doing a good job with starting to roll out security specific type products into or services within the cloud itself. But what do I use? What do I need to look at? What are the unique threats that I should be aware of? Some teams, especially if they're just starting to do this for the first time, they need guidance there. So lack of knowledge would be the second one. And I think the third one is that most likely you're running a hybrid environment. You're not, this is as you start to dip your toe, let's say, into infrastructure as a service, you're still need to get visibility into what you have running on-prem, still need endpoints, still need the user visibility. And so then you're talking about either using disparate tools or an integration question of how you get visibility across that. So I think that those, the hybrid type environment and how do you rationally monitor that in a way that's not going to be really human capital intensive, that's how I would kind of group the three challenges that are kind of maybe a bit affected by recency bias, but that I've seen over the past maybe 6 to 8 months in different types of sales conversations.
Yeah, so maybe a follow-up there, and recency bias in the rate of technology change is actually probably a good thing at this point.
Yeah.
But you mentioned tools and security tools that the cloud vendors are coming out with. What's your take on cloud native tools, like say a cloud native firewall solution or a cloud native load balancer or what have you, versus sort of a bring your own approach, choosing a vendor and using their virtual appliance or virtual service insertion, and this is probably sort of a right tool for the job answer that you're going to give me. But do you tend to see, maybe give us more of what you see into trend wise? Is it more leaning towards cloud native tools, or is it more leaning towards, a bring your own sort of best of breed approach?
I'm still seeing the latter, the best of breed approach. There may be a bit of sample bias there in the sense that of the AT&T customer base and kind of in our go-to-market, and we try to work with best of breed providers from a resale standpoint. So I haven't seen a ton of adoption within our specific customer base of moving wholesale or a lot of important infrastructure over to the cloud native cloud native options, let's call them. Now, if I think about how we have an ecosystem of third-party MSSPs that use the USM technology to provide managed security services to their end customers. And I think on the smaller, maybe a bit more agile business side, or maybe a bit more technology forward, you're starting to see the integration of a lot more cloud native security tools. So, Sentinel, Microsoft Sentinel comes up a lot in different conversations, Microsoft ATP, those types of things. So different examples than what you brought up, but I think they are good examples of the adoption of the cloud tools that are being provided by the cloud providers of choice, right? And so I think it just depends on the type of business, their maturity with using these types of tools, and how technology forward they are, maybe, and their propensity to kind of try these things out, maybe.
Skylar, thank you so much for being here. We're running a little low on time. I did want to give you maybe an opportunity to tell folks at home where they can go to learn more about AT&T and AT&T Cybersecurity and some of the solutions that you're offering.
Yeah, so AT&TCybersecurity.com is the domain, and we have all of our solutions listed out there. There's different white papers and solution papers on my specific offer, which is AT&T AT&T Managed Threat Detection and Response. So yeah, I would encourage you to go there. We try to do a lot of use case type marketing, and different white papers and blog posts that I've written and stuff like that. So if you want to learn more, start a conversation. That's probably the best place to go.
Fantastic. Well, folks, you've done it again. You sat through another hour of the best dang enterprise podcast in the universe, according to 9 out of 10 cybersecurity memes. But I want to make sure I thank everyone who makes this show possible, especially to my co-host, starting with our very own Mr. Brian McHenry. We love having you here, Bam. Thank you so much for being here. But we would want to allow you to tell the folks at home where they can find more about you, more about F5, and what F5's doing out there.
Well, I haven't been writing as much over the last year or so, but I will encourage you to go to shapesecurity.com, learn about our recent acquisition. I've been involved closely with this for a lot of months now, poured a lot of heart and soul into making the right choice for F5, and really excited about what machine learning, a true cloud AI platform, can do to help provide our customers better security. So, keep an eye on that space. And oh, by the way, F5's Agility Conference, our customer conference, was moved to a virtual. So stay tuned. If you're an F5 customer and you were looking forward to Agility, and either if you were going or were hoping you could go, but couldn't quite travel, well, we're going to go virtual. We're going to make labs and breakout sessions all available virtually. So, stay tuned to wherever you get your F5 news, particularly Dev Central and F5.com. And we're gonna bring you a great virtual conference sponsored by the coronavirus.
Thanks so much, Bam. Well, we also have to thank our very own Mr. Curtis Franklin. Curtis, people love reading your stuff. Where can the folks go to find your work and what you're up to?
Well, as always, they can find me at Dark Reading, and especially at the edge of dark reading. I had a piece go up today, what I modestly thought was a darn good interview with the former Supreme Commander of NATO, getting his thoughts on what some of our main cybersecurity threats are. He's a very thoughtful man, and got some really good information there, including some information on what he thinks we should have in terms of a national cybersecurity insurance policy. I've got some great pieces coming up in the coming week about things like putting metrics to risk. And I think people will enjoy those a lot. So come see me at Dark Reading. Follow me on Twitter at KG4GWA. I'll look forward to seeing everyone in the Twiat Riot over there on the dark side.
Thanks, Curtis. Well, folks, we also have to thank you as well. You're the person who drops in each and every week to watch and to listen to our show to get your enterprise goodness, your IT news. We want to make it easy for you to watch and listen and catch up on your enterprise news. Go to our show page right now, twit.tv/Twiat. There you'll find all the amazing back episodes, the show notes, the co-host information, the guest information, and links to our stories that we do during the show. But more importantly, next to those videos, you'll get those helpful and subscribe and download links. Support the show by getting your audio version, your video version, your HD video version of your choice, and listen on any one of your devices or any one of your podcast applications. The one you like, choose them. and go ahead and subscribe to Twiet. Now, it's best way to stay on top of your enterprise and IT news. You might as well subscribe. Now, after you subscribe, you can impress your friends, your family members, and your coworkers by sharing Twiet with them as well. Remember, we also do the show live each and every week at live.twit.tv. That's at 1:30 p.m. Pacific time on Fridays. Come see how the show is run. Come see the behind the scenes. We really love doing Twit, so you might as well come in and watch live as well. Plus, if you're going to watch live, we actually have a really great chat room as well. That's right. irc.twit.tv. You can jump into the chat room. We have some great characters in there. We get some great content from them, and we tend to drive the show from a lot of the stuff we get from there. So go ahead and go to irc.twit.tv if you're going to watch the show live. Remember, if you can't watch the show live, can't be part of the chat room, but you still want to be part of the discussion, we have a really great community out there at twit.community. That's right, www.twit.community. It's a really great website you can go to where we can have a 24/7 discussion on all the information and topics that are out there. There's the show content. There's hosts. They're actually out there. Our guests, the Twiet Riot, the Twit Army's out there. So go ahead and check it out. If you want to be part of the discussion, you might as well go ahead and jump into the Twit community as well. Remember, you can always follow me at twitter.com/LouMM. There I'll post all of my enterprise tidbits for the week. And of course, I love to have conversations with people like you. Of course, you want to see what I do at my normal daily work week at Microsoft. You can always check out dev.office.com. There we post our latest and greatest ways to customize Office and add Office extensions to be able to let it be more productive for you and your organization. I also want to thank everyone who makes this show possible, especially to Leo and Lisa. They continue to support This Week in Enterprise Tech each and every week, and we really couldn't do the show without them, so thank you to both of them. Also, thank you to all the engineers at Twit. And, of course, we also want to thank Mr. Brian Cheebert. Cheebert, he's not only our co-host, but he's also our tireless producer as well. We really couldn't do this show without him because he does all the bookings and the plannings for the show, and we definitely wouldn't want to do the show without him and all of his capabilities. But also, before we sign out, we have to thank our TD for today, Victor. Victor, we love having you here. You know, we love asking you the tough questions to see how much you've been paying attention to our wisdom. Maybe you can tell us what was the main theme of today's show.
Well, other than travel, according to Curt's article, I'm just going to go back to basics when it's safe to travel again, and I'm going to have my my old 90s written contacts lists. I forgot what they were, the black book, you know, with all my contacts and everything. And yeah, I'm not going to bring any more electronics. Thanks, Curt.
You're going totally analog, guys. Yeah. Sounds good. I would say you're very, very, very close, but no dog prize this time. That would be it's a perfect travel program. There's no perfect travel program, but maybe next time. Thanks for playing, Victor. And I'm going to say until next time, I'm Louis Maresca, just reminding you, if you want to know what's going on in the enterprise, just keep Twiet.